Well, good afternoon and hello to everyone. Hope that you're having a great day, a great afternoon. My name is Tim Alston, and I'm glad to be here with you for the next few minutes. I hope that you've been enjoying. I hope it's been warm and balmy weather where you are. It's warm and balmy weather here in North Alabama, and let's just have a good, encouraging, informative, and inspirational time together. Today is Thursday. But it's not just a Thursday. It is a Thursday that, as you learned from my previous episode, it celebrates two things. Earlier this week, in my podcast entitled "The Tim Alston Show," we talked about two milestones. I'll talk a little bit more about it today because the responses from you all have been kind of overwhelming to try to drill down a little bit more. In my two podcast episodes each week, I try to do two things and accomplish two main objectives. With the Monday podcast, what I try to do is to always educate, equip, and empower emerging leaders with God thought leadership. And I also seek to present current events and newsmakers in the light of biblical best practices. And this is no exception. Now, tonight, or today, I should say, rather this afternoon, on Thursdays, I take a deeper dive into those two objectives, and I call that or this podcast the 10 Commandments of Leadership. I take a deeper dive into the issue of leadership because two main things stick out. Leadership is not about titles or positions. Leadership is about influence and relationships, and this is no exception. On today, Thursday, is a special day in our calendars because on this day, as we are looking at Passion Week, the week that celebrates across all of the Christian world, or Christendom as we call it, we celebrate the trial, the crucifixion, the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. That happened, that's Passion Week. It's Palm Sunday, Holy Monday, Holy Tuesday, Holy Wednesday, Holy Thursday, Good Friday, Holy Sabbath, and Easter Sunday. Most of us, many of us, start celebrating that Passion Week on Friday, Good Friday, but the day before is extremely significant because that day before is called Maundy Thursday or Holy Thursday. That is the day in which the Last Supper event was held with Jesus and his disciples. And that was a significant, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on. But also this day in American history on April 17th is entitled National Ellis Island Family History Day. For it was on this date in the year 1907 that the largest single number of immigrants came to this country, passed through and were processed through that 27-acre island called Ellis Island in the middle of New York Harbor. On that day, 11,747 immigrants came through there to seek freedom, to seek the opportunities that America had to offer. They didn't just come from Eastern Europe. They also came from Africa, from Jamaica, and from France, African Americans. The Jamaican was Claude McKay, known for his writing in the Harlem Renaissance. The African was Kwame Nkrumah, who came to this country through Ellis Island, went straight to Lincoln University and HBCU in Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And then from France, interesting to know, came the actress, singer, and dancer, Josephine Baker. So the Ellis Island experience was not simply a European or white experience. It was multicultural. In fact, some 45 countries, according to the Ellis Island Foundation, were represented as coming through Ellis Island during the time from 1892 to 1954. But what I want to talk about is the historical significance of these two milestones on today because they remind us of two powerful victories over self. Over self. For example, in the upper room is where Jesus humbled himself to serve his disciples. Big point as we talk about being emerging leaders. And also on this day, as I said, at Ellis Island on the 17th of April, 1907, the largest number of immigrants, 11,747, came through there seeking freedom and looking at the Statue of Liberty, Lady Liberty, Um, and he sought freedom there. And so there's a powerful, powerful lesson there. And that's why today I bring you for this 10 Commandments of Leadership, the letter E. Now, what you've been noticing, if you've been following this series, is that we are walking through an 11-step acronym called A Silver Path, A Silver Path. And each week we have been focusing on a particular letter of that acronym. We began with A, which is awareness of the trials and triumphs and the particular nature of being an emerging leader, a silver metal leader. On the next one we did was on S. S on the silver path. S stood for step back and allow time and circumstances to elevate you. Okay. The following week we talked about the letter I. I said identify opportunities where others only see problems. As emerging leaders, our job is to identify opportunities. Where most people see problems, we as emerging leaders, we see opportunities. And we talked about that. Last week, the week before that, we dealt with L. L stood for lean not to your own understanding. Don't get all puffed up in yourself. Don't believe your own press releases, as it were. Last week, we dealt with the V. V stood for validate those above you and below you, those above you and below you. You're at that intersection as an emerging leader between those at the top and those at the bottom. You're the silver medal leader. On top of you is gold. Below you is the bronze. Today, we're going to focus in on the letter E. And the letter E stands for elude, evade, and escape all efforts at self-promotion. Let me say that again. E stands for elude, evade, and escape all efforts at self-promotion. As we shared in a previous episode, as I shared with you, one of the keys is that all compound words and concepts that begin with the word self, as in self-image, self-esteem, self-aggrandizement, self-development, all that begin with the word self are predictably limited. Let me say that again. All compound words and all concepts that begin with the word self are primarily and predominantly and ultimately limiting. Why? Because when self is your source, self will also become your downfall if you stay there. Once again, if self is your source, ultimately self, if you stick there and stay there and don't grow beyond that, will become your downfall. The Bible warns us about that very clearly in Luke 14, chapter 14, verse 11. And when it says very famously, he that exalts himself will be humbled, and he that humbles himself will be exalted. It doesn't get any simpler or any more profound than that. So let's talk a little bit about self-promotion, okay? Self-promotion, the easiest way to kind of describe it is like the game we used to play as kids called King of the Mountain. Remember that game? That game where, the objective was to stand alone at the top. Now, when you stood alone at the top, you had no friends. You had no allies. You weren't their ally. They weren't your ally. You stood there at the top. And the goal there was everyone was trying to climb over one another to get to the top, to fight for that crown. Jesus, however, as we saw an example on Holy Thursday with the Last Supper, Jesus didn't play that game. Instead, Jesus knelt and Jesus served. The prime example there was that he washed the feet of his 12 disciples, they who refused to lower themselves to wash each other's feet, much less Jesus's. He washed all 24 of those stinking feet. That was the ultimate act of showing and demonstrating servant leadership. John the Baptist, his cousin, who was his forerunner and was probably one of the OG in terms of being a silver medal leader or in terms of being an emerging leader, said it best. When he talked about Jesus, he said, he must increase and I must decrease. John pushed, he paved the way. In basketball terms, John threw the alley-oop and Jesus came behind him and elevated as John decreased. Now, that contrast with the humility that we think about in today's headlines. Let's take, for example, the issue of the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. This is the man who lives by the rule, if you don't kiss the ring, then you're fired. That's how he made his fame in this country with that TV show, You're Fired. Well, that attitude has not changed any, and we're seeing it over and over again. His latest act of self-promotion, this is a wild one. His latest act of self-promotion is he is targeting Harvard University. Now, you and I both know, if you don't, let me fill you in. In terms of the United States, Harvard is the oldest institution, founded in 1636. It is the wealthiest institution, has an endowment of roughly $50.7 billion. Billion, that's the wealthiest institution. And in terms of academics, it is the home for the largest academic library in the world. It has more than 20 million volumes. Trump is not targeting them for policy. He's targeting them to make an example out of them. There was a quotation that we learned as little kids growing up. We say it all the time. The bigger they come, the harder they fall. Why is Donald Trump doing that? I guess I kind of answered the question myself. I mean, let's look at it. I mean, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychoanalyst. I'm not a social worker or sociologist. I'm just an observer of news and a reader of the Bible. And I can't help but see this image over and over and over again in the news. Let's take Harvard, for example, as a prime example. Harvard is the oldest institution. Harvard is, when people say Harvard, people understand that is the standard in terms of education. But Trump didn't attend there. Harvard has produced more living billionaires. 188 billionaires in this country are alums of Harvard. But Trump didn't go there. 88 US presidents are alumni of Harvard, more than any other institution in the country. But Trump didn't go there. 24 heads of state and 31 heads of government are alumni of Harvard. But Trump is not one of them. Do you see the pattern here? Trump is that little kid. Michael Steele, the former chairman of the Republican National Committee, said he's a petty little child throwing temper tantrums. And what we're seeing is Donald Trump is sending a clear message to us in terms of Harvard. The latest move, he is trying now, get this, he is trying now to get the IRS, Internal Revenue Service, to revoke Harvard's tax-exempt status, trying to get them to exempt it. And that is, but the message that it is sending to smaller, less endowed schools is that if I can come after Harvard, I'm coming after you next. That's a petty, self-promoting attitude. Yeah, if I could pick off the top one and scare them away and intimidate that one, then I'll get the others. But I love what Harvard is doing. Harvard is fighting back. And that kind of fight is happening all across the country. Matter of fact, according to the Chronicle of Higher Education, in response to the Trump administration's attacks, there are faculty senates across the country that are voting, banding together to fight those attacks of Trump's. They are banding together as never before. Never before have these schools come together to form what they call, they are these mutual defense pacts coming together to fight against Trump. It reminds me of the quotation from Vance Havner, a Christian minister and author. And he said, and hear this well. He said, Christians like snowflakes are frail. Christians like snowflakes are frail, but when they stick together, they can stop traffic. I love that quote. Christians like snowflakes are frail, but when they stick together, we've all been in snowstorms, or many of us have been. That will stop traffic when those individual frail flakes stick together. And that's the beauty of this whole thing. Meanwhile, his temper tantrums are causing us consumers to bleed. We're hearing the talk about tariffs. That's the big word in the news these days. And I'm telling you, and I'm saying to you, don't be terrified. Don't be terrified. What we're watching is this back and forth. And what it appears to me, and I can't shake that image of him saying, well, I'm the big boy now. I've got all the tools in my hand. I've got the power in my hand. I'm going to shape everything in my image and do everything my way. And that's not healthy, and he's not going to win. See, what Trump does not know, he doesn't know history, and he doesn't even read the Bible. If all he would have to do is look at Nebuchadnezzar, King Nebuchadnezzar, who was the king of that first world empire, the Babylonian Empire. Two things came out of that are important for us. Number one, the Babylonian Empire, if you know a little bit about history, as they went around the world and conquered nations and territories, they brought the best and the brightest into Babylon to acculturate them into a Babylonian culture to make Babylon stronger. It's from that Babylonian culture that an empire, that we get the stories of David and the three Hebrews. So as you can tell from that, Mr. Trump and your Trump acolytes, diversity made Babylon stronger, not weaker, stronger. It was all of those ingredients working together that made Babylon even stronger. The message is clear, and it bothers me when I think about Trump. When I'm watching these deportations, when I'm watching arresting these foreigners who are here in school to get an education, to make a better life for themselves and their families and their country, what Trump is trying to do is to rid the nation of everybody that does not look like him. And he's going to suffer, but he's going to lose. What he doesn't understand is that diversity is what makes us great, not monoculture, not fear, and certainly not tariffs. As I said earlier, the Ellis Island experience, as we celebrate today, National Ellis Island Family History Day, the Ellis Island experience tells us that according to the Ellis Island Foundation, although they don't have an exact number, they're saying that approximately 45 foreign countries had immigrants come through Ellis Island. Those 45 different cultures made us strong, make us strong. But here's what concerns me the most. What we're experiencing, this is the second term of Donald Trump, what we're experiencing is what I call Trump 2.0. I'm not the only one who said that. What we're experiencing is Trump 2.0. And what it feels like in these first 80-some days, it feels like a payback tour. It feels as though the spoiled little petty kid is trying to pay America back for not reelecting him in 2020. But it goes even a step further than that. You've heard the talk, and you've heard it on the news, and it's no secret that he is trying to challenge the U.S. Constitution to allow him to run for a third term. But it's even worse than that. There are people in Congress, I think there's a Representative Gill who's proposing to put Trump's face and his image on the $100 bills. There's also an effort, according to Politico, to rename Dulles Airport Trump Airport. There's also an effort, and I'm not making this up, there's also an effort to carve his image on Mount Rushmore. There's also an effort to create a $250 bill with Trump's face on it in the name of honoring him as we get ready to, in 2026, celebrate the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States of America. I'm not making this stuff up, folks. I'm not making this stuff up. Oh, no. He does not know history. He doesn't read the Bible. All he would have to do simply is turn to the book of Daniel, which chronicled the life and the power, the legacy of Nebuchadnezzar. He in Daniel 4 stood one day, the Bible, according to the Bible now, stood on the porch and said, "Is this not the great kingdom that I've developed?" And God said, "Okay, that's it." He stripped him of the kingdom. He sent him out in the fields, turned him into an animal, a wild animal, to eat grass for 7 years. And then after that time, Nebuchadnezzar finally got it and said, I will praise the God of heaven, as opposed to myself. Well, that is a pattern that unfortunately the president of the United States is following. And we don't need to stoop to that. I prefer the example of Jesus, who at the height of his game showed his disciples that true leadership comes from those who serve. And the lesson worked. He taught them over and over and over again because they didn't get it. Ultimately, they got it. Ultimately, they took that message of servant leadership throughout the whole world, and it became Christianity, which currently is the world's largest religion with 2.56 billion people. So we celebrate these two holidays today, these two milestones, both Holy Thursday with the upper room example of Jesus washing the feet of his disciples, and we also celebrate National Ellis Island Family History Day to show the people that made the prime sacrifice that did not stop at Ellis Island, but kept moving into the country for opportunities because they didn't focus on self, but they focused upon the larger self. And so that's where we are. So today and the rest of this weekend and rest of our lives, let's celebrate the sacrifices made by immigrants. Let's also focus on the sacrifice made creating diversity that makes us stronger, not weaker. Let's also celebrate the God of heaven through his son who sacrificed. And as I like to say, there could be no us without Jesus being number one by serving in a number two position. Remember the text I said earlier, he who humbles himself shall be exalted, but he who exalts himself shall be humbled or base. Thank you for joining me again today. Again, my name is Tim Alston. Thank you for witnessing and observing this show. I hope that you invited a friend. If not, let them come in on the replay. If you enjoyed what you've seen, if you enjoyed what you've heard, if you enjoyed what you've experienced, what you've felt, please like, share, and subscribe. We look forward to seeing you next week for the Tim Alston Show on Monday and again on Thursday for the 10 Commandments of Leadership. Thank you, and I leave you again with a quote from Philip Brooks, who was the 18th century American Episcopal clergyman and author. He said, don't ask for an easier life. Instead, ask to become a stronger person. He said, don't ask for task equal to your power. Instead, ask for power equal to your task. And then when you do the work will not be the miracle. You will be the miracle. Thank you. Have a happy weekend, a happy Easter weekend. And remember, he went through a lot of pain. He died. He was crucified, but he rose. And if we are with him, we too shall rise. Thank you and God bless.